Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Survey of American Film, and I want to talk to you a little bit about Citizen Kane, this amazing film that we saw just before vacation, and that I hope you were able to finish thanks to the YouTube clip I sent to you. The nice thing is we were a full hour in when we ended our discussion, and so you only have an hour of this to watch. So I'm hoping you can all comment on the film as soon as possible. And in the comments, I'm really looking for you to see what you learned from the film. Now, J.J. Doyle pointed out that a lot of people list this as the greatest movie of all time, and that's a lot to live up to. And so sometimes your expectations of the movie get to be so extraordinary that when you look at Citizen Kane, you don't see anything at all. That sort of problem is really a problem of expectations. Why do people call it the greatest movie of all time or make it the #1 movie? It's because it does so much. It really is pushing the limits of the medium in 1940 in a way that no other film had ever done. As you look through the PowerPoint, I try to show you some of the techniques and magic tricks that are used in the film. But you got to see a bunch of them before we left. You got to see the matte shots that open the film, that move us over fences and closer and closer and closer to that eye-like light in the building called Xanadu. Then the light goes out. This is the progress of the entire film. The movie is intended to be frustrating, that you keep coming up to the truth, and the truth slips through your fingers. You keep coming up to the light, and the light goes out. So looking at that, you want to think about Citizen Kane is a metaphor for how we solve mysteries and whether mysteries can really be solved at all. Maybe the real answers are much more complicated and much more complex than we think. Another thing that's important about the film is that you see all the multiple narrators. At the very beginning, you see the snow globe shatter into a number of pieces, and we see the nurse come in and she's refracted in one of the shards of glass. This is what happens through the rest of the novel, the rest of the film. We won't be getting anybody's actual sense of truth. You'll get only their particular points of view. You'll get the nurse's point of view. She's the one who heard the word rosebud as Mr. Kane's last word. Or was it? Do we believe her? You'll see Mr. Thatcher's library diary account. That's all written from his point of view. Mr. Bernstein, who worshipped Mr. Kane, tells his affectionate story, which is very nostalgic and optimistic about the story of Charles Foster Kane. It's something Bernstein still holds on to later in his life. Then Jedediah Leland, who was Charlie Kane's closest friend and became miserably disappointed in who Charlie Kane was, and was forced out of his life, or forced himself out of his life because of his own principles. And then we get Susan Alexander Kane, a wife who is abused by Charles Foster Kane and forced into a tragic situation in the opera. And then finally, a butler, Ramon, in the house tells a tawdry version of Kane's final moments. In that final account, you'll see Kane walk past the great infinite mirror shot. There's an infinite mirror, and you see endless refracted images of Kane. And this is bringing us right back to the shards of glass at the beginning of the film. There's a lot of questions about who's telling the story and how Charlie Kane becomes somebody different for every storyteller who tells his story. You want to look at all the techniques in the film, and I'm hoping you can chime in with some of your favorite moments. A lot of you seem to like the moment where where Charlie Kane walks in front of a picture, and the picture comes to life suddenly, and he's in the picture, and it's all the newspaper men from the Chronicle who come over to his side and the Inquirer. Take a look at that scene. Take a look at a lot of the scenes in the movie. We talked about some of the techniques, the chiaroscuro lighting. We talked about the low camera angles to make Charlie look like a giant. And at some points you see Jedediah Leland seems like the giant slayer. He's like Jack, he's small, and Charlie Kane seems huge. by comparison. And is Jed Leland the Jack? Is he the Jack the Giant Slayer? Is he the guy who takes down Charlie Kane in some way or another? You see even bigger giants than Charlie Kane. You see boss Jim Geddes, whose figure is enormous, and even towering over Charles Foster Kane, which suggests that there are backroom powers like the classic Boss Tweed from the 19th century, who had more political power than any particular politician. And you can look at not only just the lighting and the different relationships in size and the blocking, the way people move and become more powerful or recede in power, but you can also look at how Charlie is many times a helpless, manipulated character, sort of a little boy who's always trapped by other forces in the life that he's in. Look closely at the film and you're going to see magic tricks. Orson Welles was a magician. You'll see elements of Orson Welles' own biography. You'll see elements of William Randolph Hearst's biography, the character, one of the characters that Charles Foster Kane was based on. Another was McCormick, of McCormick newspaper chains. McCormick and Hearst were these enormous giants of yellow journalism, and the movie is a send-up of American media, how wrong it went in the 1890s and early 20th century, how the media made people go into war, made them believe things that weren't so. It's the very definition of fake news. So this movie from 1940 is dealing with something that's very relevant. Look closely at each of the individual characters, and you'll see America in a lot of its different faces, and that's why this is an important film for American film as we're discussing it. You'll see the immigrant or the child of immigrants. You'll see the boy from the frontier who becomes the sort of American upper class figure. You'll see real old-fashioned, old money upper class. That's Jed Leland. The boy from the Midwest is Charlie Kane. The child of immigrants is Mr. Bernstein. You see a lot of the different faces of America in that way. You see Susan Alexander Kane, who's just a humble American. And in many ways, the story captures a whole sense of America that very few films captured at that time. Look at the ending too. We find out what Rosebud is. And since you got to the end of this video, I'll tell you that Rosebud is the sled that he threw at Mr. Thatcher way back when in front of Mrs. Kane's boarding house. On the sled is a rose that burns up in the fire, a rosebud. And some people think that that is a graphic and lewd image created by Herman Mankiewicz, which was a reference to William Randolph Hearst's wife's genitalia, interestingly enough. You can actually look at the rosebud on the back of on the sled and see if it does indeed look like it could be female genitalia. Is this all in some way some Freudian quest? It's some Freudian problem that has made Charlie Kane so painfully narcissistic and so painfully trapped in his own mental, psychic binds, I think is the word from Freudian psychology, and that you're bound into certain realities. So take a look closely at the film. Give me a thought or two about what you liked about it. Yes, you know, it's not everybody's cup of tea. I understand that. But I think it's a movie from which you can learn an awful lot about what cinema is and about what we're trying to gather from about American cinema in this class. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.